So what we're going to do today, we're going to start the conversation about the second paper. Obviously, I feel like the best place to start is the prompt. Let's go make that a little bigger. That's much better. All right. So all of this should feel pretty familiar with some choice changes that I will highlight. To begin with, the length is 3 pages. The weight, 25% of your grade. I know that's nothing to sneeze at, both of those. But given how the assignment is meant to work, you're going to need those 3 pages. More on that in a second. Format, it's always the same. It's MLA. We're not going to cover that. If you have questions about it, by all means you can ask me, but like we might talk about works cited here at some point. That'll be it. The text, Die Hard. I hope no one is surprised by that. And then it will be due the 8th of next month. Today is the 10th, so we basically have a month to watch the movie, which you were supposed to have already done. We'll talk about it for a couple classes. We'll think about it some. We'll read about it a little bit. And then you have, I feel like, quite a little while to write about it. But we'll see. What the paper is. So the way I like to approach talking about a prompt, all of this is here for you, for reference. If you want to read it or if you have read it, great, that's what it's for. I paraphrase, I'm not going to read at you. Basically, the last paper was taking what we would do in a single class. Focus on a single scene, 1 or 2 specific elements, and then to the best of your ability, make an argument out of, talk about the significance of some of those details out of that scene, right? For this paper, you're still going to do that, but you're going to do it with more than 1 scene, okay? You might have 2 scenes. You probably max out around 3, but look, either way, you're still going to focus on, you're freaking me out looking at the doors. Sorry. You're going to focus on specific details, just like we did with Rocky. But again, now, as opposed to having to make an argument out of a single scene, you can basically consider the entire movie, right? Like all of that is available to you now. Hence the longer length requirement. Questions about any of that? Yes.
All right, so it's like, what does the film have to say about us as people or society? What if something I want to say is like, people apparently don't like people with foreign accents because guys all have accents in that movie?
Well, I mean, to be fair to the film, they are just European, and Europeans have accents. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you left it at that, my primary feedback would be we need to complicate that a little bit. But there is absolutely something to that idea in the movie, this notion, we might get into it at some point.
Also, it's like the whole thing of like, I don't know, foreigners attacking the Twin Towers.
Well, this is way previous to that. Yeah. That happened in 2001. This is 88.
Well, yeah, but it isn't like, it's the, never mind.
I'm just saying, like, that would involve time travel. No, but okay. What I'm agreeing with you on is there is absolutely something to how these Europeans are depicted in the film. First of all, we have to be as specific as we can. They are foreigners, but foreigners is all kinds of people. Europeans are depicted in a certain kind of way in the movie. Yes, they're the bad guys, but it's, you could argue, kind of interesting how these particular bad guys are depicted. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, there's absolutely some stereotypes in play, for good and bad, I think, when we think about some of these characters. But to put it another way, Hans Gruber, the kind of guy that he is, I don't think in most movies like Die Hard would be depicted the same way if he were from somewhere else, right? There'd be other stereotypes in play. Like, so absolutely, that's a conversation worth having in the movie. But getting more specific at the outset would probably complicate it a little bit, give you more to talk about. But sure, the question of Europeans in the film and kind of who they are to us as like USA Americans is absolutely one of the questions, for sure. Other questions? Cool. All right. Well, what we can do then is just talk about the movie. What I like to do for like the first class or two, and I'm rhyming now, I don't mean to, is just watch some scenes. I want to give you guys some ideas to like take home over the weekend and think about. I want you guys to maybe fully appreciate like the depth to which you can dive into some of these scenes. What we're going to do today is going to feel a lot like what we did with Rocky, okay, with one choice difference. And also, I don't know, I guess I always worry about front loading too much because I want to see what you come up with first. I'm going to put some ideas to you at some point today, okay? You might agree or disagree. That's fine. I don't mind it. But I am going to try to push a little bit of something onto you just to see what you think, okay? Before we do that, we're going to watch some scenes. We're going to actually just start with the beginning of the movie. Just like we did that very first day with Rocky, all I'm interested in right now, the super low bar I have for today, anything you notice in this first scene. Some of it will be fairly obvious, but if you really pay attention, there's going to be a couple moments that are really interesting, especially now that you've watched the movie. Some of you, it was your first time, right? It was your first time. Your first time. That's so wild to me. But anyway, we'll talk about it. We'll see what you guys come up with. And you guys do great most of the time, so we'll just see what happens. All right. Okay. That's the very first scene in the movie, right? In general, what are we doing here? Like, what are we accomplishing just overall in this first scene, do you think? What does this do for the viewer? I think would be one way to put it.
It establishes the main character.
Yeah, we learned some important things about him, right?
Some of his flaws, like also who he is.
Cool. So what are some of those things?
Well, he's afraid of flying.
He's afraid of flying. How do we know?
He's just like clutching
The very first shot of the movie. I mean, apart from the plane, I suppose, which is pretty key because, like, otherwise you're like, where is this happening? But as soon as the first character we see close up of his hand on that armrest, and he's really holding it, right? That's an interesting introduction to an action hero, right? By the end of the movie, I mean, he's killed, I don't know how many people. He's jumped from the top of the building. He's like, but your introduction to him is this. That's really interesting. And you could argue purposeful, right? Okay, good. What else do we learn about him? He's a cop. Which again, it's interesting the way that's done, right? It doesn't, and I don't know if we'll have time to get into this, but one of the trends, I'm just going to lay stuff out at your feet today a little bit. One of the trends in the movie that I'm very interested in is how guys talk to each other. And specifically, I mean men. There's a lot of man on man in this movie, not a lot of women. There's some that's super important. But especially early, it's a lot of how men talk to each other, how men view each other, how they exchange information. In this conversation, nobody really just comes right out and says much. The guy does, the passenger does, right? He offers up things. Bruce Willis, John McClane, very much doesn't. First question he asks him, you afraid to fly? Or whatever, he goes, we'll give you that idea. He doesn't tell him, right? How does he find out he's a cop? He sees his gun. Which, by the way, could be alarming for anyone, but like on a plane, that's you can't have those. That's not something they just let you on with. So you would be alarmed if you see a guy in a place where they're not supposed to have one of those. And he has to kind of offer up an excuse. Like the only time it seems like men, like capital M men in this movie, offer up information is when they have to. That's interesting. Other things you guys notice?
His ring.
Good. I was wondering if anybody would see that. The two things you learn about him right from the jump, before you even learn his name or what his face looks like. He's afraid to fly, and he's married. You see his ring. That's kind of interesting. One way to consider this is what's most important about his character, right? Sure, it's all like heroic stuff he does and like how he carries himself in the movie. But the movie wants you to know a couple of things about him way before any of that. Two of them are he's afraid to fly and he's married. I guess the third one is he's a cop. Right? Cool. Very interesting. What else? Anything else?
He wants to impress someone.
Do I know?
He wants to impress someone.
What do you mean by that?
He's not the big bear.
That bear! What the hell is that bear about? That's unexpected when he pulls it out, right? Those of you who hadn't seen it before, you weren't expecting a giant bear. It's a little weird. Okay, good. I kind of have an argument for what the bear might be, but I'm gonna let it lie for right now. But again, that's like the fourth thing you learn about it. What the fuck is that bear? Okay. There's at least one other very interesting moment in the scene. It's really quick. The stewardess. I suppose nowadays we call them flight attendant. Yes. What about that?
He kind of like double takes to her, and she kind of like smiles at him.
She does. All right. Let's go look at it real quick. Again, because like what we're saying now is this is like the fifth thing we learn about him. Now he double takes after that. What happened just there? What's up? They did. Is there anything else going on? You could argue. How's it shot? How's this part shot? Who do we see? We see her. Now he double takes, and that's his own thing we could potentially talk about. But what goes on there? We'll look at it again. That's not just eye contact. That's a lot of eye contact. What's going on? It was a lot of eye contact, right? You can look at somebody and then you recognize, like, all right, we're done with that, and you move on. That was a lot of eye contact from her. Now we don't get to see if he reciprocates in the same way, okay? Because it's shot to where we see her face. But again, that's a decision, right? What's like the fifth thing we learn about him here? What is the film trying to argue to you about this character? This whole first scene, as it turns out, is like a quick laundry list of like 5 super important things about the main character. The fifth one is this look that she gives him. What are we learning about him? Do you think? Based on that look.
Maybe it has to do
Do what?
maybe it has to do with that ring, and probably just wearing it to wear it.
Oh, I mean, no, we don't know all that yet. Like, what is it? I'll put it to you this way. What does it mean that this woman he does not know, has never met before, checks him out? He's attractive to women. Yeah. He's sexually viable. But again, that's the fifth thing we learn about it. So top 5 things we got to know: scared to fly, married, something about the bear. Again, I have thoughts on that, but we can leave it there for right now. Cop, women want him. That's kind of interesting. He's gonna be our hero, right? Some of that flies in the face of, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, those different characters that they play. I don't know that all of it does. The woman question, how he interacts with them, how they interact with him, that doesn't have to be in this scene. It's not like he could pull the bear out and we could cut to the next scene, right? They want you to know he's attracted to women. That's important in how we define this guy. We're just going to go to the next scene. We're just going to watch the first couple. Technically this is 2 scenes, but I break it in half here anyway. All right, so McClane in the terminal. What happens there? What stands out to you guys?
There's something about California.
California, he says. What makes him say that?
The girl.
What about the girl? She jumps on that dude, right? In a, we'll call it possibly suggestive way. They're very close. They're very affectionate. That would be fair to say. But he says California in like this almost derisive way. Why? What is that about, do you think? Like we learned that McClane is from New York City. He's a New York City cop, he says at one point in the movie. What's the deal with California? He says it because this young woman jumps on the dude and like bear hugs him. Why do you think that is? What is it about California? Okay. Let's try this. When you think of California, more specifically, the people in it, how do you picture those folks? So they're a little freer, you could say. Yeah? Yeah? And you brought up the fact that he's not that way. How you could even think, how is he depicted in the scene we just watched? How does he not fit that sort of free paradigm? How's he look? What's he doing in this terminal? He's got his bear. What's up? I mean, compared to her, sure.
Even once he got to the limo job, he's like, hey, how you doing? Where we gonna go? He's like, he's hesitant to answer stuff like that.
I'm having a real tough time understanding you, Doug.
I said, even when he felt like met the limo driver,
Yeah.
as soon as like he was trying to create conversation, he was reserved, like he wanted to answer.
Well, so on the one hand, that takes me back to what I pointed out to you guys earlier, right? Like, certain men in this movie, McClane's one of them, aren't super forthcoming with information, right? Especially about themselves. But it does seem like he turns a little bit when Argyle says this is his first time driving a limo, right? It seems like McClane softens a little bit toward him there. We're still not leaving California behind, by the way, but we can do this first. Why do you guys think that is? Because he does seem a little more reserved with Argyle until he tells him that, and then it seems like their conversation changes a little bit.
To kind of make him feel better, I guess.
Oh, about it being his first time? He's
Yeah.
like trying to be nice? Maybe. Well, one thing to consider, because McClane says it's his first time riding in one, right? I think you would have guessed that just looking at him. Why?
He doesn't look like the type of dude who just rides around in one limo.
Why not?
I don't know.
He's not rich.
He's not rich. He's just a dude. He's in like an overcoat. He's dressed like a guy who just came from New York City. He just looks like a guy who walked off the streets of New York City onto a plane and ended up in California. That's what he looks like, right? Most of those people probably don't ride around in limos. But he's also like just a dude in the way that we're using it, right, is maybe we'll say he's middle class. I don't know. We're guessing at his socioeconomic situation. He's definitely not rich. Might we think about reasons, given McClane's background, why he might be reserved with Argyle when he first meets him? And then why he softens with Argyle when Argyle says this is his first time driving a limo? Why does that change his opinion of him, do you think?
At first, maybe you might think that they're from like different classes.
You might think what?
That they're from like different like social classes.
Okay.
And then whenever he says that it's my first time driving, he kind of relates to him.
He lets him know, like, hey man, I'm not like a limo driver like that, right? Like, it goes back to that different worlds conversation we had about Rocky a little bit, right? He's uncomfortable just with the whole idea of being in a limousine. And now he's gonna go deal with the driver who like deals with people like that all day, you know. He's not built for that. He's a little afraid, maybe, kind of like he was in the plane. And then when he tells him, "Hey, it's my first time. I'm not maybe what you thought I was." Oh, cool. Okay, well we can actually get along a little bit. Yeah. So there's also this question here in the second scene with McClane, not the second scene in the movie. I planned a little badly for that. Sorry about that. Where also this notion of what we expect people to be versus what they really are, sort of based upon information we think we have, right? And how we comport ourselves. All that is to say, McClane sizes Argyle up based upon the situation. He gets it wrong. But then, of course, we're going to see pretty quickly how their relationship is super different from there on. So a lot of things happen there. Tell me about it. Anything you noticed stands out as potentially interesting?
John McClane could just light a cigarette wherever and whenever he feels like it.
That is the time, the era, the 80s for sure. He does it in the terminal. You can't do that. Yeah, they smoke wherever the hell you want, sure. But it's also, I guess, for that character, even when he's in the terminal in the previous scene we looked at, it's a great way to show that you're like nonchalant, you know? Like he's in that terminal and everyone is like milling about and doing all kinds of things and he's just kind of fuck it. Like it's the universal fuck it is what that cigarette is, right?
Well, in like books and fiction, like usually when there's a character who smokes, that like usually symbolizes that they're wise or something.
Well, he has time to pause, is what it is, right? And there's different ways to approach that ability. But again, I think one thing the previous scene highlights with the smoking, more so than even this one, is he can be separate from everyone else. Like he can have his own space, sort of in that moment of smoking, apart from all of it. And like maybe he's observing things. You start to realize later in the movie he's super observant, which is probably pretty helpful for his job. But that's another one of his like primary characteristics, maybe the sixth one we learn about or whatever. But absolutely. What else do you guys notice? He sits up front. It's almost like the movie is saying, in case you didn't recognize what was happening when these two guys first talked to each other, neither one of them is cool with this limo thing. So he sits up front, puts the bear in the back. Yeah, very much John McClane is not comfortable in this world that the limousine represents, right? And they say this in the movie. They don't say it in the scene we looked at. Do you guys remember how's he end up in a limo? Does anyone recall?
The CEO bought it for him.
Sends it for him as a favor because he's Holly's husband. So that limo comes from this world that she's in, right? And again, you see it all through the first part of the movie. When they're at that party, he does not fit in at all. Not even close. You think about the first bit of the movie, the plane, the limo, to this huge skyscraper that they keep looking at. Everywhere you go, John McClane is very uncomfortable. And it's interesting. Again, when we focus on the kind of guy he is, he's the hero of the film, right? But he's not comfortable in any of these places. And the question keeps coming back to, why? The plane seems a little different, but I'm going to put that out there for you. But the other two, the limo and the skyscraper, I think we can join those two. Like, what about that world do you think makes McClane so uncomfortable? While you're thinking on that, somebody tell me what time it is, if you don't mind.
So 4:03.
What's that?
4:03.
4:03, thank you. Why is he so uncomfortable in the limo and soon to be in the skyscraper? What's the issue for him? This is the scene where he says, "I'm a New York cop." What is a New York cop?
who typically like stick to the streets, kind of comb for clues,
He's what?
kind of comb around for clues and stuff.
Yeah.
Don't really hang out in skyscrapers.
No. Why not?
I mean,
What goes on in a skyscraper that this guy can't be party to? And if it helps, think about the one he's going to, right? What kind of skyscraper? What are they doing in there?
it's a holiday party,
Yeah. What do they do the rest of the time?
big business,
Huh?
big business.
Big business. It's a national, multinational corporation. It's owned by Japanese folks. It's in America. That tells you it's, at the very least, a corporation that spans the Pacific. It's probably kind of a big deal. Yeah. A lot of money going through there. And of course, you find out later that's actually what the whole movie is about, right? Is all the money that's in the damn building. McClane's not cool with that. He's not cool with all his money floating around. The status, the kind of association that comes with riding around in a limousine. So much so that he can't allow himself to sit in the back. Right? Puts the bear back there. It's kind of a fun joke. He can't sit back there. He can't make himself do it. He rides up front with Argyle. Like he's a buddy. And again, he can relate to Argyle now because Argyle has told him, oh dude, I'm not from that world. Like you misunderstood, basically. Yeah. Other things you guys notice. There's a couple other things going on in the scene.
Argyle talks about picking up holidays.
And then what?
They said the bear. They said the
That is interesting. I don't know what to do with that, to be honest with you. My gut wants to throw it away as just a funny line, but like, what do you guys think the bear is? We can start with what it really is. What is the bear really? Like, you figure it out, I think, at some point in the movie. Who's it for? Guys.
His wife.
No.
Kids.
It's for his kids. He's got kids, right? I skipped through it, but we just learned they have kids too. He's not just married, he's a dad. He's coming to see his kids for Christmas. You gotta have a gift.
Oh, I was gonna say that it's Christmas. He put on a Christmas song. Like, right.
Oh yeah, we'll come with that. I mean, that's a different thing, but that's very good. I want to talk about that too. But real quick, the bear. He carts it through the whole movie. He has it at the end. It's a Christmas present. That's weird. I mean, on the one hand, I guess it's not because that's the time that the movie is set, right? Like, so, but it's a little touch, and that's going to move us actually really well to what you just pointed out. It's a little touch that I think the movie has throughout. They keep reminding you about Christmas. Not just that it's happening, but some of the other sort of paraphernalia or some of the things that come with it being Christmas time, you know? And one of those is he needs to bring this thing to his family, right? So the bear, in a way, you could say, is almost like him carting around sort of like his relationship with his kids. That's why it's in the back seat. It's in like the good spot where the rich people sit. Anyway, to the Christmas song. Do you guys remember what McClane says when Argyle starts it up?
Put on some Christmas music.
Yeah, man, can you put on some Christmas music? What is this? He basically says. And then Argyle's response is,
This is Christmas music.
this is Christmas music. I only played a little bit of it, but from the first line, it's pretty clearly
Yeah.
it's about Christmas, right? Now, of course, what does McClane mean when he implies that it's not Christmas music? He's saying it's not what?
Like traditional Christmas music.
Like carols, you know? Like, where's fucking Jingle Bells or whatever, right? Again, just like we talked about with the flight attendant, how the scene doesn't have to have that. That was a decision. Same thing here. They decided to include this song. It could have been Jingle Bells or whatever. He's going to walk into the building here in a minute. I think we have time. He's going to whistle another carol. So, like, it's gonna happen. Stuff like it's gonna happen throughout the movie. Why this song, do you think? This is 1988, right? So I mean, again, it's you guys weren't even alive. I understand that. I was 2 years old, so like I wasn't really cognizant either. But why do you think do that? Probably, what are we, 10 minutes into the movie? Why that song? That just feels really important to me. To make that decision. To have McClane say, this isn't Christmas music, and then for Argyle to go, sure it is. Just listen to the words, man. Because it is.
Maybe to emphasize the difference between,
I understood some of what you just said.
maybe to like emphasize on the difference between
Argyle and McClane?
in North California and Florida.
Ah, you brought it back to what I wanted to talk about, and you guys were very fervently against. Okay, cool. Maybe the second thing. Maybe not. I mean, I'm actually not sure about that. But the first thing, absolutely. And we can be pretty basic about this, guys. What's so different about McClane and Argyle? What happened?
One's black, one's white.
Argyle is much blacker than McClane. We can say that? Okay. And the music he chooses, stereotypically at least, is also much blacker than McClane. Okay. That's weird for 1988. That is an interesting decision. For the most part, when Argyle's not around and when, I just forgot, I keep wanting to call him, is his name Al in this movie? Has anyone ever seen Family Matters?
Oh, yeah.
I know,
Yeah, now,
because he plays the same character in that show and it wrecks me.
when you talking about the Scott though?
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up watching that show when I was a kid, so it makes it hard for me. Anyway, that guy, I think his name is Al in the show. Fuck, it doesn't matter. That guy, him and Argyle, they're like the two black characters in the movie, and the hacker. That's it. But the hacker he's basically a white guy. Like, he's very like, I'm a nerd. And when you think about stereotypes, my point is, when Argyle's not around, this is a very, very white film. Not just with the people in it, but like with the things that they're doing, with the stuff that they even talk about. But here, for some reason, the people that made this movie wanted to introduce the film. Like, really, the movie starts from here. They want to introduce it with this song. We don't have to solve this today. This is actually a hard question, but I want to bring it to your attention. It's worth thinking about why they want the audience here in 1988 to really start the movie with this song. It's Christmas music, but it's different music from probably what a lot of people would have been expecting. Yeah.
Is it because this is a Christmas movie, but it's different than every...
I think that's a good start. I like that parallel. What you're basically saying, I don't know, back in the day when you guys studied for SATs, right? Like, this is to this as this is to this, those analogy games. Christmas carols are to, it sounds like Run DMC, I should look it up. But anyway, Christmas carols are to 80s hip hop as Die Hard is to Miracle on 34th Street, right? Like, I like that. That's a pretty good start. For sure, it's letting you know you're in for something different. Absolutely. To fully answer that question, and again, I say this is a big question. This is the kind of question you would think about for the length of a paper, okay? What is that difference really, right? We're not going to solve that today. We're not even going to try. But thinking about this movie as we go, that is absolutely one of the very interesting ideas. And again, I think it matters that it's 80s hip hop. Like, it's super current. And this is a very old song, right? Some of the people that were in the song are dead. Like, it's that old, okay? But this is just happening when this movie comes out. So it is 1988 in a way, right? It's very interesting. At least to me. What time is it now?
4:13.
Thanks, guys. All right. And I can kind of skip through the. Hang on. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll skip that. There's something to be said for what Argyle says to McLean here. I don't know that we have time to do it because I want to at least watch one more scene. But it is interesting that McLean says one thing, right? He's been pretty open with Argyle, at least when compared to other people so far. But as soon as he starts talking about his marriage, he like kind of shuts down again. But Argyle figures him out, right? He's like, you thought she would come out here and come crawling back. That's the only description we have at this stage in the film of his wife. I mean, we see her, right? It's kind of implied what kind of person she is, but this is the first description of her we get from his side. That's an interesting way to talk about your wife. Anyway, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I really want to focus on that with the last little bit of class that we have. All right, so there's really two halves to that scene. I want to focus on the first half first, just because there's way more to talk about. And I think we should get the big thing out of the way right now. What's the big thing you learn in the first half of that scene?
His wife is going by her maiden name.
Yeah. That's not good. That's probably not good. Not least of which because he didn't know. Right? Not only is she doing that, some people just decide, no, he did not know she was doing that. It is a surprise. So you already know that maybe their marriage is a little strained because he's been away for so long. That's not good for anybody. And here you find out that she doesn't even go by McLean. All right, cool. Now my second question to that idea though is, and it might be early in the game, there's way more to think about when it comes to this question, but I'm curious. Is that significant in any other way, other than just story stuff, other than, ooh, McLean's in for conversation, right? Like,
I mean, it shows that she's not like openly saying, "Hey, I'm married." Like she's like openly saying, "Hey, I'm such and such. Like, I'm not attached to this marriage."
she's not attached to him like
Yeah, I
that.
don't want to say attached to that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, I don't think any of us are implying like she's out there just like, I'm a free woman. Like, it's not like that. But it's interesting, again, especially in an 80s movie, that you have this married woman who, I'll put it this way, chooses to go by her maiden name, right? She makes a decision without consulting her husband. That's her choice that she makes. How do you read that in terms of, like, I'll just give you the answer if I say it that way. How do you read that in terms of how they relate to one another? Her choosing to go by her maiden name.
She's tired of this shit.
Well, sure. Again, story-wise, absolutely. And again, that gets made pretty clear in the next scene when they have their conversation. Absolutely. But beyond that, like in terms, or like at this stage, I'm trying to at least a little bit look out into that big question from the prompt. What does any of this say about us as a people, a society, a culture? What are we focusing on every time we think about McLean and Holly? What's like a big question? What's up?
Are they gonna get back together? Or?
Yeah, story-wise, but like anytime we're dealing with those two characters, we are investigating a certain aspect, at least one, of our society, a certain institution, and how it works and how we think about it. Yeah. This is 1988, and again, we all know that was a very long time ago. It's almost me old. But 1988 is about as far away from us now as 1988 would have been far from the 60s. Right? Which is my way of saying it's not that far removed from a certain kind of way of doing things. A certain more traditional, more Christmas Carol way of doing things. When you guys picture like a 50s or 60s marriage, how do you picture that? What does it look like to you? What do you say? Housewife. That's a pretty loaded phrase. But yeah, mom stays home, She does the cooking and the cleaning. She takes care of the kids. Dad has the job, brings home the money. Pretty standard, right? Well, clearly, things are going to be different in this movie. Not only does Holly have her own money, probably better money than he has. Okay. She has the kids. She has a woman watching them because she's busy doing her stuff. And she goes by her own name. Among other things, I mean, yes, trouble in paradise for sure. But also, that's about power, man. That's about independence, right? And you could argue she takes some of hers back when she does that. It is interesting she does it in secret. There's two ways to look at that. One is maybe she's not completely independent because she doesn't tell him. The other way is maybe she's more independent because she's like, fuck him, he'll find out when he finds out, right? You can take it one of those ways. But either way, we are very clearly, one of the things we're thinking about in the movie is like a new concept of marriage. A 1988, damn near 1990s, right? Concept of marriage. McClane maybe wants one thing. Holly, very clearly, wants another. And it's like, well, how are we going to reconcile those two narratives? I think it's got a lot to do with what people were thinking about what marriage maybe should be in that place, in that time, right? Anything else you guys notice? I cut this scene in halves, by the way. You guys probably may not have much to say about the second half. I do, but anything else you guys notice stood out to you?
I noticed that you like kind of scoping out the place.
I'm sorry, what now?
I noticed that you're kind of like scoping out the place and the people.
In the second half, right? He's like walking through. Yeah, let's kind of watch that real quick. What time is it, by the way?
4:23.
Appreciate it. All right.
10:38, so probably one more.
Well, he says nice toy right there.
I know. All right, we'll talk about that and we'll come to you. Because I have a whole thing with the second half. How do these guys talk to each other? He says nice toy, which is very much, they speak in smirks, don't they?
They said a nice toy, and the guy was like, yeah, it'll show you how to get the bathroom.
It'll help you find your zipper if you need to take a leak, he says. What a strange exchange between people. Why are they talking like that, do you think? There's a couple reasons. What did you say? They're boys? I like how you don't say they're men. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. They're communicating in this, like more manly way, right?
It's like an understood language or something.
Yes. But I want to talk for just a minute about what that is. Like, what does it look like here? What's up?
I come to the sarcasm because
Yeah.
our guys got these fancy toys and like, oh yeah, they'll actually show you how to do the rest of it.
So they're belittling this technology, right? Why? Why do you think they would do that? When you belittle something, you have a reason for it, right? Like, why do that?
Because it was pretty much doing the job for them.
It was doing dude's job. Yeah. There's different ways to argue why McClane does it, because he starts it. My favorite, though, is probably that he's trying to help that guy out. It's like, look at how unnecessary you are. Oh, this thing's a toy, man. Don't even worry about it, right? But then the guy comes back. They relate to each other here. They use the same language, to borrow your metaphor, right? When you walk into a place with people you don't know, and then all of a sudden one of them speaks the language you speak to you, you go, oh, okay, cool. I'm immediately at ease. It's similar in a way to Argyle. He thought they were going to be speaking a different language. He was like, no, man, this is my first time. Oh, God, thank God. Okay, we can be pals. Yeah, same thing here. Hey, man, here's a dick joke. Oh, yeah, fine, cool. I know how dick jokes work. So it belittles the thing. That's one interesting description of guy talk, boy talk, whatever you like. The other one is weirdly phallic. What were you gonna say?
No, I actually get the saying, like, he was like, oh, like, how you do spend for your job? Like, he was like, oh, like, you actually need to hold your hand? Like, kind of belittle him, like, hey, like, you actually need me to do it for you? Cause, like, he was pretty much saying, like, hey, like, I actually wish, like, I'm talking to you, like, I don't see what I have to type it in. And then,
Yeah.
like, you know, you got, like, like, you're a grown man, you just type it in and figure out what you're trying to do.
Possibly. I mean, again, there's a couple different ways, like, in terms of nuance to take them talking to each other, right? Yours is a little more confrontational, which is absolutely, like, is much more pronounced in other parts of the film, not least of which because he's in confrontations with folks. But however you take this one exchange, right? Anytime one guy is talking to another in this movie, it is almost always like that. My favorite scene that we almost never have time to watch is when, I can't believe it, his name is Al in the movie, right? Okay. Well, no, but I'm afraid, I'm doubting myself because I'm thinking that's what he's called in the show. He has a different name in Family Matters.
Carl.
It's Carl. Thank you. But I keep wanting to. Anyway, I just don't trust myself because I'm gonna slip up and call him Carl. How's he allowed to play a cop in both? Anyway, when Al gets introduced, he's in a convenience store and he's talking to the clerk. The way that clerk talks to him, like, I don't know if you remember the scene. It's kind of wild. Like, it's ridiculous. He is a cop. Like, Jesus. But every time a guy talks to another one, it's always some level of, like, competition almost. Like, one-upping each other. And maybe you could argue that's going on here too a little bit, right? Absolutely. And if that's true, then the whole cute toy, you could argue he's kind of saying, hey, this cute toy is doing your fucking job. Yeah, your useless job. This toy, yeah.
Yeah, like, it was the play on the different lifestyle, like, they actually got, like, more advanced technology, so, like, it made their job easier. And, like, he was from New York where, like, you
Well,
talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would push it further and say it makes his job obsolete. You know? I mean, my favorite part of the scene of that first half is he goes, oh, 30th floor. They're the only people left in the building. Well, it's like, well, then we didn't have to do any of this, did we?
Exactly.
They're the only people. So then, what was any of this? Yeah. What time is it? I'm so sorry.
14.
Thank you. I just get real nervous because I usually use that and I have nothing. There's more we could say about that. I want to leave it open though for you guys. The other thing I want to point to, and we're going to have to watch the second half of the scene actually, so it's fresh in your mind. All right. So you pointed out the first thing, and we'll start there. Could you tell it to us again?
That he's like scoping out like the place and the people being like aware.
Yeah. Again, that's a little bit back to the cigarette conversation, right? Most of the time in these movies, the hero, he doesn't have a superpower, but he basically does, right? Schwarzenegger is muscles. Stallone a lot of the time is like, you're going to beat him down, but he's going to get back up. His is, he's super observant and resourceful. Like almost like he could make a gun out of spare parts, right? Like it's almost to that level. Like he feels almost like a Boy Scout a little bit, right?
Because every time he's out of bullets, somehow he get another gun.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. He's resourceful. He figures out a way. He just guts his way through, but not in like an overpowering way. What's interesting here is that, first of all, it's a great example of that, right? But my thing is, in this particular scene, what does he notice? Like, oh, God help me, I'm going to back up a little bit and try to find it. This is not a great system for that. Is it? Right there? All right. What's going on here? I know he's entering the building, but like, I would argue the lobby he was just in looks one way. The hallway, sort of elevator area he's entering looks pretty different. What's different about it?
It's not as open.
It's not as open, somebody said. What'd you say? You said open. Somebody else said something else.
Oh, I said protect these walking in the light in the door, they got a gate, like,
There's this huge metal gate behind him that, I mean, we learn after, but I mean, you would assume comes down, right? He's going to see a camera right after this. He's going to see another guard just kind of hanging out right behind the corner. There's a lot of stuff. Like, what kind of stuff is in this one hallway? Back to back to back.
Security stuff.
A lot of security stuff. A lot of it. Like in a very quick space. There's also, for the full effect, I want you to hear, he's whistling. There's another sound if you listen really carefully. Did you see that other sound?
Yeah, right before he started whistling.
It's like a hum, kind of. It's like the air conditioner or something, right? It's like we're all quiet right now. We hear the projector. It's that kind of noise, ambient noise. Again, I would argue that doesn't have to be in the movie. They could take that out. They mean to include it. Why do you think? It's only in this scene. It's not even right at the start, and then after this, it's going to kind of cut out, right? It's just for this moment. What's ambient noise about? Do you think?
You said it's from the like, air vents.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to assign a source. We don't know. But I mean, you're led to believe it's probably something like that, right?
Usually, like, it gets quiet, so you think something's about to happen. It's kind of like, this is getting weird. This is getting suspicious.
There's a sense of foreboding in this hallway scene, I think. A little bit. That guard has always creeped me out. Maybe it's because he's leaning, like it's weird. All I can think, like I'm trying to work this out kind of like out loud with you guys, like McClane just left.
you're like, why do you have to be there? That's the question.
Yeah, well again, it's all the security back to back to back, like it's all right there in that one little hallway. Which implies, I guess, they need security on the one hand, which is interesting, right? That implies a threat. But the other thing I was going to say is, he leaves that wide open lobby, that wide open space that's in front of the building. Like, he leaves all that stuff behind him, and he goes through this very narrow hallway into the rest of the building. It's almost like, it's like that hallway is this interstitial space between the world outside and the world he's about to enter, right? That makes him so uncomfortable. It's full of all these associations he can't really deal with. And that hum to me underscores the silence, like makes it more uncomfortable, makes it more foreboding. Then you see the gate and the other security, and that tells you like, yeah, things aren't maybe as inviting as they first seemed, right? Like there could be other problems here, other issues, for sure. What time is it?
4:35.
Okay, we're almost done. We never talked about this. We're putting a lot out on the table now, so I want to ask, what the hell is the deal with California? We talked about this before, but we can recap a little bit. What do you guys think of when you think of California? Opportunity? Okay, that's interesting. Why do you say that?
People always want to go to like Los Angeles and be movie stars.
Okay, well, so a very, very particular kind of opportunity. You're talking about like fame.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. You go out there and be famous. We talked about how they could be freer out there in California for some reason, as opposed to like a New York City cop. How do you picture a New York City cop?
Kind of a grizzled dude.
Grizzled. Like McClane should have more stubble, right? For sure, for sure. Everything's grayer and colder. Is that fair? Like, isn't it interesting in some ways we apply the climate of a region to the people in it? You just imagine the people from there are colder and grayer, and the people from California are sunnier. nicer. And they jump on each other. It's no
Well, I
big thing.
mean, there is the psychology behind that.
Absolutely. Now, I'm not saying there's not something behind, but I'm just saying the film is also very engaged. Like, there's different ways to put this next point, but it takes advantage of the fact that we have those associations, right? And it wants you to know too that McClane does too. So in that earlier scene when he goes California with the young woman, right? The film is telling us that's California. We all agree, right? McClane's not that. He's something else. He might be what you assume New York is, right? Like he fits much more into that little pigeonhole. But it's interesting for a couple reasons. I told you at the start of all this, I think one of the things this movie is interested in is how we size each other up. Assumptions we make about certain kinds of people for different reasons, and maybe how that plays out, okay? Another reason that's interesting, oh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I hate that. Oh no. Oh shit, hang on. Oh, this sucks. When it happens to a student, it's one thing. When it happens to me, it's devastating. Oh, okay, I think I got it back. But it also comes down to this whole question of discomfort for McClane, okay? We already talked about the limo and the skyscraper, and that makes all the sense in the world, why he doesn't fit in those places, okay? With that line of logic, though, you could also say he doesn't belong in this state. The entire state for him is this other planet. Here, next time we're going to focus on him and Holly, because we got to dig into that. When they talk, she asks him, "Where are you staying?" And he says, "Pomona." Or rather, he says Ramona, and she corrects him and says Pomona. He has the city wrong. He knows so little about this place and how it works. He doesn't even understand the geography. It's like another planet, you know? It's interesting that Holly has made some of the decisions she's made in that place, right? Maybe makes a little more sense in California with some of the associations we have as opposed to New York. Maybe you could start to argue that whole being freer thing is real in a way. Was she trapped in New York in some way or another, right? The movie starts to ask you. And there is a way to talk about the plane with all that too. We don't have time, but it comes down to McClane being uncomfortable. There's different ways to be uncomfortable, but I think a lot of it comes back to one particular thing from McClane that is the very first thing we learn about him. We just don't realize it at the time. All right. You guys did all right. I appreciate it. Next time, as I said, we're gonna go. I mean, basically chronologically from here for next class. He's gonna talk to Holly. He's gonna say some real dumb things to her. We're gonna talk about why they're dumb, but important. And yeah, that's really it. My only advice: if you want to watch the movie again, I mean, I can't imagine you would this quickly, but you certainly can. Think about it a little bit, right? At some point in your weekend, give a passing thought to Die Hard. That's all I got. I'll see you guys Monday. Thank you.